Hello and welcome. My name is Lindy. This is Krysten. This is Charlee. And we are going to take this conversation a little bit deeper. We have another video about court, kind of what that looks like. We shared about how majority of our moms here at ｙMA are at risk of having children removed from their care or from their home. And so therefore they are not at a place where they are impacted by court. However, another portion of our moms, which is a smaller portion, have already had children removed for various reasons. And so they are now working towards reunification to get children back in the home. And so where we're going to go with court, the conversation today is touching that smaller portion of moms who are now, they have caseworkers, they have legal people involved. So that's the context for this conversation. So Charlee, Krysten, I'd love for you to just speak towards, like, if I'm the advocate and I've never been to court, we kind of talked through like some generalizations there. But for this conversation, what if mom is already in court and there's some opportunity to testify in court, or whether I've like been in there long and in her life very long or very short, like, what do you mean? What does testifying mean? Could you paint the picture for, like, most of us are picturing some like Law and Order show in our head, right?
Right.
And that may or may not be true to real life. So could you each speak to the picture? Like, what does testifying mean? What does it look like when we get there?
Sure. I can speak from my experience with ｙMA, and all of my presence in court has been done virtually. And so, yes, Zoom is where court happens.
Which probably most people would not think.
Yeah.
Right?
And I'm doing it in my office. Maybe I could do it at home, but I am joining a lot of other players to the case. And from my space, I've seen people join from their phone. I've seen people join from a computer. And the way that it works is that there is a judge who's leading the conversation.
Sure.
And there's a case manager who the advocate is probably aware of at this point in her time with ymA and with the mom from the dependency side, who has helped mom navigate all of her case plan goals. Parenting is one of them. And so we come in as a service provider. We are the parenting service provider. And the judge will start with having everybody introduce themselves. And so I typically will have my name. So I'm going down to the details. Like my name on Zoom will be my first and last name, and then I'll put ymA parenting provider or something just to help communicate to the entire room who I am. And the ymA coordinator will also be present, and she can have that as well. So it's okay if it's not on the advocates, but it is helpful. And we all go around, say our name and why we are there. And so I've been in the courtroom, and mom or the dad has a friend that's there, has a parent that is there. You're welcome to be there, and the judge will make the decision on whether or not he or she is uncomfortable with a party that is present. But once everybody's gone around the table and introduced themselves, then each provider or each key player will provide an update. And so that typically is the opportunity to, if given specifically asked, to give a brief synopsis of what I've already, as the advocate, submitted in my session notes.
Sure.
How many sessions has mom done? And we can go through the actual details of what do I say specifically. And again, the ymA coordinator is there to help guide. But a lot of what I'm going to communicate should have been communicated ahead of time through my written session notes. But I'm also there to fill gaps.
Sure.
And to speak on behalf of mom of how she's just doing conversationally. Like, I am a voice in the room. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Like, I get to say something that goes down on the record with this mom. And so it's really, it can be scary and daunting, but it's also a really interesting and cool experience and super helpful to have for mom to see a familiar face. Because to us, it might feel, maybe it's a little cool because it is, oh, this is like Law and Order. But for mom, this is very serious.
Yeah,
because this is connected to her life. And I think that's important for us to remember that the people that are at the table have a real job at hand to make sure that everybody in the home is going to be safe. And so they're going to take that very seriously. And so we approach this very professionally and aware that what we say holds weight, but also we get to go in of, this is my experience with mom. This is who I've seen her to be, how she's working, because they won't know.
Yeah.
You know, our session notes are there, but maybe they've missed one. And so what do I want to make sure is said and stated? And then mom knows at the end of the day, she had a familiar face that was there. Some court hearings can feel positive, some can feel very negative for a mom. And at the end of the day, no matter if it's positive or negative, she'll know that she had someone who cares for her deeply that was there with her, who's going to hold her hand and walk with her for all the steps that follow after.
Yeah, that's big. Anything you'd add to that, Charlee?
No.
Yeah. So I think just to kind of reiterate, you certainly touched on it, Krysten, but like if I'm the advocate, I might be kind of preoccupied with, are there things I should or shouldn't say? And I might be worried about mom being in the room. You certainly alluded to, like, most of the time mom is going to feel comforted by a familiar face or feel like she's got someone in her corner. But could you just kind of just clarify again, like what whether I have positive things or strength-oriented things, or like I am reflecting some realities and truths and facts about mom's time that maybe weren't all positive, and she's in the room. So it's like a lot of tension to hold. Just anything that we can continue to be mindful of as the advocate.
Yeah, I think this starts on the session note right after the session. So before you get to court, there's a lot of work that's going into that of mom's going to be in the room, she's going to get an update, and we always will say that mom should not hear for the first time how she's doing or any concerns that we have in the court.
Right.
And so in your session notes, you should have identified all of the details, but also followed up with mom. And the same aspect of we want to make sure that mom's not hearing for the first time in court, I tend to always lean towards, if I'm going to write something that doesn't feel very great, I'm communicating with mom throughout the journry because we're working together. These are her goals, and if there's a gap that she is experiencing or she is in, we're addressing that together. There's nothing really that a mom that I've worked with that is written that she doesn't know about. And so it starts at the session notes, and then once you are there, you always want to present information in a dignifying way, and it can be difficult. I have sat through courtrooms where I've had to share things that I didn't love that I wanted to share. I have teammates that have had to do that, and it can feel heavy, but it can always be done in a dignifying way. And again, it's not going to surprise mom. I think that is the biggest miss, is if mom hears from her advocate something that she never had an opportunity to address, to maybe work on, or just didn't know about, is very unfair and can feel very violating in that moment.
Right.
And so we just go in sharing everything up ahead of time. Bring in the ÄMA coordinator, have a 3-way conversation. Hey guys, we're going into court. This is what I'm bringing in. This is how I'm here to support. But we're never also going to fabricate information.
Yeah.
You know, it's very important, because we're not the decision makers, that we can put everything on the table. For those that are the decision makers. And I'm hoping that's answering your question of how do we just prepare and how do we navigate the positives and the negatives, is that there will be positives and negatives naturally, because that's life. But we do it with grace, we do it with dignity, and we do it, we prepare for it.
Yeah. That's what I was going to add, is like, I think it's helpful for those in the advocate position to remember, like, you're not going to get a court date and we're just like, cool, have a good time, hope it goes well. Obviously, we have staff, we have our team. At that point, most of our advocates would have already had, XYZ amount of sessions with mom, which therefore they would have had documentation and session notes that the advocate, can review. Like, I think when we hear court, especially if we haven't been there, we imagine like showing up and suddenly we have to know all this stuff. But the context is, you will have worked with mom for however long you have. You have the ÄMA team and staff as the coordinators to like walk alongside you and prepare and talk through. It's like, okay, like hopefully thanks comes down. Anything you'd add?
Well, and like the information we're presenting, so if you're familiar with the ÄMA program, moms go through a series of assessments, both at the beginning of the program and then again at the end. And sometimes we're just testifying to like the results of those assessments. And what's important for advocates to remember is we have the freedom and the liberty to just speak to the facts. This is what happened circumstantially. Mom is living here. Mom is making this much money, whatever the questions are. And then whenever we're asked to interpret what that means, we have the freedom to be like, I'm not an expert in that. I'm not a behavioral specialist. I'm not a therapist. So sometimes the probing questions that follow the facts that we present, we get to be like, I don't know. And that's okay. We're not in the room to pretend to know or be an expert at these other all of these just interlocked reasons and crises or experiences, issues that mom and her family might be experiencing in that moment.
Yeah. Charlotte, you shared in another video, and I want you to just repeat some of the story of where an advocate's voice brought clarity.
Mm-hmm.
Like, can you just speak to that a little bit? And of course, for that advocate too, she would have had the documentation to like back it up. But could you just share again, like the weight of that and the role that the advocate played in a court proceeding?
Yeah, it's common for as many of the dependency case managers on the court side and on the Department of Children and Family side, they have so much on their plate. Yeah. And so a lot of times we're like, ÄMA, as an organization, as a program, we are there to make your job easier, not harder. Like, we are building a bridge with our local DCFs of the world. And so with that being said, sometimes there's information that is misconstrued or misunderstood, and not from a place of deceit, not because they're just trying to terrify or torment this family, but just because we're moving too fast. So we're missing the details, and the details really matter.
Yeah.
And so we've had that experience many times from a middle schooler that has this occurrence at school, and the report was mom was dismissive, but in fact, mom was she was advocating for her child to make sure that child got the best care in that moment, and was just doing what the school had asked her to do.
Sure.
All the way down to a mom is missing court. She's not here. We've been waiting for 5 minutes, and is written off as she's just absent. And our advocate was like, no, her car broke down this morning. Like, I'm texting with her now. She's 10 minutes away. Wow. Can we hold? And so that's a big deal, because an advocate, a mom, they could have canceled that court hearing, and now you've just prolonged the case by 3-4 months before you're going to be in front of a judge again. So it's little details all the way to like this big thing that occurred that was not the true story, and we get to shed light on the truth of it.
Yeah. No, in our training, we use the language of like, advocates are a voice box for mom. Mm-hmm. It's not that they are her voice, right? But they represent like a reflection of her walking through this program, her working really hard, her navigating a lot at one time. And in those moments, obviously, mom will get to speak for herself in some of the context of court as well. But having someone else in her corner that's walked really closely, like you said, like sometimes it's the tiny details. Yeah. Sometimes it's this really big thing. Mm-hmm. But again, we talk about that whole picture versus one corner of it. And the scene looks very different when you have the whole picture. Yeah.
And again, I just want to emphasize, like, I think the scary piece of court is that we feel like we have to be the decision maker. Yeah. We're not the decision maker. We get to present information in its purest form from what we know, like unconstrued, very understood. That's our job and responsibility. And now we're trusting the system to take that information and to make the best, most just decision with that.
Yeah, that's good. Anything you'd add?
I would add that what happens after court and what an advocate can do is also very important. You know, I think checking in with a mom after an experience like court is huge. Even if just to say, hey, I'm here with you. That mom knows there's still someone in her corner. And sometimes mom's not ready to connect right after, but she knows who she can go to if she does want to. Right. And so I would encourage advocates that your presence is also helpful for the follow-up of, hey, mom, what questions do you have that we can bring to the case manager or we can bring to your lawyer? Mm-hmm. Because you get to then step in of, what do you need to understand that better? Or what felt unclear to you? And I think it's also helpful to help mom in her voice of, who can you talk to? Yeah. How can I connect you to that person so that she doesn't feel like she's just being tossed around in a system, but she is a key player and she has the support that she needs. And so our advocates get to be that person for that mom.
Awesome. No, that's a good point. It's like, I'm just thinking through far less scary scenarios of like, man, you go to a new doctor by yourself and it feels scary, or you walk into a new building or for XYZ reason, and that can feel overwhelming. And so to walk into court and have a familiar face who has your back or has already disclosed and like talked with you about what we've worked through and what kind of like the tone of what will be shared with given the opportunity. Yeah. Or even just like have someone to like make eye contact with. I'm just imagining the relief for mom to have something or someone familiar, even just by presence. Yeah. Yeah. And not underestimating that.
Yeah. And I think it's important, like in our testimony as advocates, Krysten, I'd love to hear what you have to say of like how do we depersonalize it? We're not saying what we think or what we believe or like, she's such a great mom. And we don't have any like evidence, if you will, to really back that up. That's great that we love mom and we think she's amazing.
Yeah.
And the court doesn't care. They
Sure.
care about the facts of what has she accomplished, what has been her progress, and what does she still need. And so, like, how do we depersonalize it and just stay really factual?
Yeah, I think it's just that. It is focusing on the facts, and in our other videos talking about session notes, how do we actually bring out from a session what is subjective, what is objective? We can offer some training and some insight into that. But sticking to those facts is, I think, vital. You said earlier that we're not experts. And so not approaching the topic as an expert and understanding that I can't really speak to certain things because I'm not the expert. I can't speak to necessarily her full mental health or how she's working through her mental health because that's not my place. But what I can speak to is how has she been meeting in our session? Has she been showing up for our sessions? How has she been approaching her goals? What are some things that she has communicated that have been standing in the way? Because she will have ÄMA goals that we will help identify, which may or may not be the same exact case plan goals that she has. So mom is working through a lot potentially.
Right.
And we get to just speak through, this is how she's come this far through this. This is where she's going. And mom, to your point, Lindy, will get opportunities to speak as well.
Yeah.
But I think it's very fair to say the court doesn't want to know if we are her best friend.
Right.
We want that, and she will have, people will like her and love her, and that's important and valuable. But in that moment, we want to know, does she have the tools that she needs? Is she safe? Can she apply them? How can we help her? And that's something that I've noticed in Florida, is that we want to help birth families stay together. And so the court needs to know, what does that look like?
Yeah.
And so we are just speaking to mom's progress, her approach. And I've had times where I have shared things that didn't feel great to have to share, but I was able to find a strength, and I focused on a strength perspective of mom, in spite of this, has showed up every time on time.
Yeah.
And she has shown in that a willingness to fulfill her case plan goals, and that is what the court wants to know, because they want to help mom too. At the end of the day, they want to help mom. They want to help the family. And so what information is most helpful to reach that goal?
Yeah.
That's super helpful. Thanks for sharing that, Krysten. Well, we hope that was helpful for you all. Thank you for joining us. Again, we've got several other videos, especially session notes. We're going to touch on that too. So we hope that you join us, and thanks for being here.